Hi, and welcome on this webinar about roaming and about why we, as an industry, think the roaming has a very important place in upcoming legislation, AFIR. So, what about to maybe start very briefly say about your companies, just to have it on the record. So, what you guys are doing, and then we jump on a specific topic of roaming. Maybe Christian, if you can start.
Thank you, Peter. Happy to do so. Yeah. Hello, my name is Christian Hahn, and I'm representing Hubject today. As Hubject, we are a typical eRoaming service provider, how we call ourselves. So we are offering services on connecting different charging networks with each other, which we are calling roaming, as mentioned already. And yeah, thank you for having the opportunity being on board today.
Thank you, Eric.
Hello, my name is Eric Plaquet. I'm President and CEO of Gireve. I joined the company 16 months ago. And we are also a central digital player in the field of e-mobility and new mobilities, offering the same kind of services as Christian said for Hubject, meaning roaming between B2B partners in the charging ecosystem.
Super, thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Peter Baudig, and I'm representing here the ChargeUp Europe, Association of the Charging Service Provider in Europe. I as well the co-founder and running the company Greenway, which is the charging service provider in Slovakia and Poland. So let's go directly to the topic. Christian, maybe, or Eric, can you give a very brief definition? What is the roaming actually? We probably everybody heard about the roaming in the context of the telecom industry. So what is it in our business? Eric, maybe.
Okay, from the point of view of the end user, roaming enables any EV driver to go and charge everywhere using any kind of charging infrastructure belonging to anybody, whatever location, country, and so on, with one single badge or APP, and at the end of the month, receive one single invoice from a mobility provider. That's basically what it's all about.
Christian, what's your definition of the roaming, if it differs?
So as Eric mentioned, we also call the e-mobility market a charging ecosystem because it consists of different players, different products, different services. And therefore, we believe that one way how this possibility should be achieved is by having the possibility of a contract, a charging contract, and this contract will be accepted at every charging station. That's simple. But we also believe that, of course, this is a proper fundament for value-added services, how we call it, so that also customers can experience not only the charging way, but also can reserve a charging station and can experience other services, which we believe is an important part of the mobility future.
Thank you. So basically, what we can say, the roaming is something which enables us technically and commercially to connect, to have one provider of the charging services and connect to many chargers. And so have one contract and being able to connect many chargers, either abroad or even in the home country. But can we maybe still put some more analogy with some other businesses or something which maybe people knows much better, especially those who are not familiar with the electric vehicles and not own the electric vehicles, who didn't use the roaming? Because I'm personally convinced that anybody who has electric vehicle most probably already used roaming. But can you explain it to those people who didn't?
Yeah, maybe I can start. You're totally right, Peter. This concept of roaming is something we are using in all kinds of industries already. One of the more famous examples is definitely the telecommunication market, where we are used to roaming since more or less 20 years. So maybe we remember the early times where we still needed to switch SIM cards, for example, when we traveled from country to country, or needed to use different pre-selected tariffs if you wanted to use even in the same country different mobile phone networks. That's all over, and the concept behind is roaming, so that I can be identified, me as Christian, using a specific smartphone contract, and this smartphone contract is accepted by network operators in other parts of the country or also in other countries as well. And therefore it doesn't require us anymore to switch a SIM card or to buy a new smartphone if I'm traveling from A to B.
Eric, do you have any good analogy from other businesses or something which could make it easier to understand what the roaming is?
Well, basically, I'm in line with what Christian has just said. We can imagine many kind of businesses, basically all kind of businesses where you got B2B players entering into transactions, and you need sort of hubs, platforms, intermediation platforms to deal with offer marketplace and transaction technologies. So we can make an analogy with Euronext, for instance. If you want to buy options, shares, whatever, you don't need your bank to be connected to whatever bank in Romania, or you just need each player to connect to Euronext, and then the intermediation player in the middle does the job to send the data from one side to the other side and to process the transactions and everything. So this is what it's all about. It enables many players to work very easily with many other players, and well, this is for the benefit. This will benefit at the end of the day the end user.
Okay, we will get to the benefits of the end user later on, but if we already said the roaming has two aspects. It's a technical aspect, it's a commercial aspect. So can you elaborate a bit about how does it work in the background? So what is the technical stuff and what is the commercial stuff?
Well, for this is quite simple. You need two things. You need all players to connect once to the hub, the platform in the middle. And by connect, we mean technical connection, which means IT, APIs, and then contract-wise, you need to sign the roaming agreement. And once you've done this, you've created the technical connection and you've signed the roaming agreement, then all that you have to do is just to maintain the IT connection and upgrade that connection over time, and exchange invoices. And for the end user, as long as the connection is made, then the service can be used. And that's all. It's just quite simple, in fact.
Christian, do you see it in the same way, technical-wise and commercial-wise?
Yeah, but definitely. Again, I only can support Eric in his statement. On the other hand, I also would like to highlight that, of course, there are differences between the different roaming approaches. And again, I think that's good because we already talked about the choice of customers. And of course, we also believe that B2B customers also need to have their choice, and therefore they can choose from different roaming solutions in the market, which I believe is exactly the way it should be done. And we also totally appreciate that our customers are even using all the solutions depending on their specific needs. So sometimes they are using Eric's solutions a bit more than our solution, or vice versa, or sometimes they are relying a bit more on bilateral roaming solutions as well. That's exactly how the market should work, that companies can make their choice based on their specific needs. What we don't believe in as Hubject is that there is no choice possible, because there is a strict limitation on specific approaches. And that's the reason why we believe that also roaming is so important in the actual discussions on a regulatory level, that companies understand that they have the choice. Of course, there need to be some kind of boundaries we all need to fulfill for sure. But on the other side, I think having the choice and having different options in place is super important, because that's the only way from our point of view companies can optimize their business case and can also handle the complexity. Because we also talked a bit already about the reason why roaming is in place, and one reason is customer experience, and we will detail this a bit later on much more. But on the other hand, and that's really important also to keep in mind, is that we are right now in the beginning of a much growing market. And that's great to see, because you all have worked for years in this industry already, and now it's happening. So super impressive. And we see every day that it's happening even faster than we all have thought, for a lot of reasons. But that will create more and more companies involved in this market. And again, that's a good message that this industry becomes so attractive that new companies are starting their business models every day in this industry. But again, this is increasing complexity, and we believe that roaming is a very good way to handle complexity because, of course, companies are different and charging networks are different, and some charging networks are more relevant or less relevant for my specific business model. And of course, then I will have the choice if I'm connecting directly or if I'm connecting via a roaming platform or via different ways as it suits my own business perspective. And that's a reason why we believe that roaming, the existing roaming approaches are so important because, as mentioned already, they are giving me different choices and different ways how to connect to different charging networks.
I can only confirm that as a company, we are a client of yours, Gireve and Hubject, and basically you are helping us to connect our clients with the chargers of different charging point operators across Europe or even within the same country. So we see as well the role for the charging hubs, and which basically do this form where we do not have to maintain 20 connections and 20 bilateral contracts with other partners. On the other side, we as well experiencing the direct B2B and peer-to-peer contract where we are connecting directly. So I think from the position of someone who provides a service to the customers, the roaming is basically enable us to provide much better services and broader offering. But let's maybe touch exactly the most critical point, because we discussed about the technical stuff and what it really is, but what it really brings to the customer. So what's in your view the most critical things? What is the value added of the roaming? Why we should organize the charging services in this way?
Maybe I can start with the first answer from our side. I believe roaming is so important for the charging customer journey because charging is much more than just payment. And quite often in our discussions, we are maybe focusing very much on the question, how can I pay for my charging session? And that's a very important question, don't get me wrong. And we all know that as we are still in a very early market phase, we see some challenges in regards of what is the right price for a charging session and how can we calculate it, how can we make it reliable. We all know that there are things to improve, but on the other hand, it's the whole customer journey is much more complex than just payment. It already starts with the question, where's the next charging station, and is the charging station available right now? Is it maybe out of service? Is it used by another one? Is it fitting my charging needs? So do I want maybe to get a very fast recharge in a couple of minutes, or do I have a bit more time because I'm anyway stopping by the supermarket on the street across, and things like that we believe are very important for the full customer journey, and therefore we believe that this can be supported by roaming in the best way, because roaming is exactly enabling this, that customers can get access to this information, the so-called POI information, so point of interest information, where's the charging station, and this is available. But of course, we also provide additional information. And also topics like rating, for example, the experience of customers who have visited this charging station before is also quite relevant, because we also know, again, we are in an early market phase, and yes, in the past we were satisfied with every kind of charging station installed everywhere just to have charging stations, but we also see right now that the needs of drivers becoming more diverse. So some customers, they don't feel comfortable anymore if they need to go into a dark road somewhere to recharge their vehicle. They would maybe prefer to have a charging station somewhere where it's more brighter, where there's a better surrounding, or where there's a cafe next by, and these kind of things are becoming more important. And again, to come back to my first statement, this needs to be summarized in a customer journey, which consists of much more than just payment, and therefore as Hubject, I believe that focusing on this customer journey is so important, which can be supported best by the concept of roaming.
Rick, what's from your point of view the most critical value-added service of this roaming? Why we are doing it even?
Yeah, obviously, I fully agree with this. There's a big difference between payment, I mean the single payment action, and service. And obviously for the end customer, people are looking for service as well, as Christian said, location, reservation, real-time reports on the charging session, remote charging, and more to come in the future, thanks to technology, thanks to data exchanges, and so on. So this makes a big difference, and we should try to offer the best and the most complete service, not only a payment service. And back to what we were saying just before, I mean, the positioning of the platforms like us, Hubject and Gireve, are also playing a part in the market, which helps foster the maturity of the global ecosystem. Because we are providing scalability, standards, processes, quality, 99.9% SLA, and so on and so forth. And some big players are mature enough to provide a relevant service in peer-to-peer mode, and that's cool. I mean, we need this to go on, but you cannot just rely on multiple relationships between multiple players with different level of qualities and so on and so forth. Because if you got problem between players, the end user will pay for this at the end of the journey. So by structuring the ecosystem, we're also helping everything becoming smoother for the end user.
Mm-hmm. I can confirm from the point of view of the customers where we discuss with the customers trying to make a service, what basically they value on the fact that we are providing the via roaming the services as well on other infrastructure and ours. Was probably the most critical thing mentioned, the kind of the price transparency. So basically, it's not really a matter only of how I paid the one specific transaction, but as well, do I have to understand thousands and hundreds of the various pricing scheme, which is very complicated to read, where I get them. So it's not only about how to pay, but do I have a comfort that basically when I'm making the transaction, I know for what price, for what would be the consequences. So therefore, I think this is a critical role of the industry to evolve in a way which is modern, which is basically something which other people are used to already from other industries, where they have one contract, which they obviously can choose, and they can do. They can choose exactly the one which they fit to their needs, but then they can have a complete free of mind and then don't have to care about anything. And I think very good. It was presented as well in analogy with the telecom, and we had to deal and think about many things several years ago when it comes to our calls. Now I think basically the general experience with the telecom is that you select the best options which you think is the best, and then more or less forget. And that's something which I think should achieve in this industry as well. So the user experience needs to be extremely seamless, and preferably everything should run on the background, and people should not worry. And that is, in my view, the critical thing, because the roaming is actually the thing which enable us to move from very simple, straightforward transaction-based system to e-commerce, which we are still now more and more used to. So that's at least what I can refer as a main benefit of what was mentioned by our customers in this respect.
Maybe one addition, Peter, to your last statement, just to have the connection to the telco industry. What we're also seeing right now in regards of charging is that we have the first flat rate tariffs in place, and at least based on the consumption we are seeing on our platform, they are really skyrocketing right now, because of course that helps a lot to solve the complexity on the right pricing, as you mentioned, for EV drivers. If they know, okay, I can charge for this amount of money every month, that amount of kilowatt hours, and maybe the development we have seen in the telco industry, where it took us some years to get to flat rate tariffs like we're using nowadays, is maybe even going faster in the charging industry. Let's see. It's a first trend. Let's see if the trend is surviving. But it's definitely very interesting to see how fast these models are now being offered, and how fast they also are being accepted by customers. And maybe that gives us some guidance in which direction it goes. And again, flat rate tariffs are only possible based on contract-based models, because that wouldn't be possible on any kind of ad hoc charging approach.
Absolutely, absolutely, and we, for example, call this approach roam like at home. So basically, one contract with one defined transaction and we call this approach roam like at home. So one contract with defined conditions, and then all this complexity, which is related to having many providers, various prices, various pricing schemes, needs to be done in the background by the professionals. But on the client-facing, let's say, situation, it has to be extremely simple. So I think it's us as the professionals who need to take care, and the customer needs to have a seamless experience. Okay. What very often there is a discussion or put in some kind of a contradiction between the ad hoc charging and the subscription-based. As we said, the roaming is basically the prerequisite to having subscription-based, or subscription-based is very fit with the roaming concept. But we have as well the concept of ad hoc, so payment on the spot for the energy which I purchased, usually by credit card or this kind of payment form. So do you see this as a kind of a contradiction between these two? Can it live together, or how do you see that?
Well, my opinion on that is that it can live together. I mean, why should we try and force people to decide that ad hoc payment is number one solution, or subscription? There's no point in I don't know, in explaining to a boomer that wants to use a credit card that he needs to use a subscription, because now it's like Netflix, or you don't need to pay every time. And at the end of the day, you got some people who are very, very comfortable with the fact of just receiving an invoice at the end of the month, and they don't care about anything. And so why changing that? I mean, it's quite understandable that in different situations, different use cases, people would need both solutions to be offered. So I think it's quite understandable that it can live together. There's no point where it should not, and when we don't need to try to influence this, makes no sense.
Yeah, I can totally agree. That's also how we see the actual market situation, that it should be the choices should be available. As mentioned, the open market consists of having the choice of whatever fits to my own needs, and therefore we believe that it's a good idea to have both solutions in place in parallel, like we already have seen, for example, in the German market since 2016, where we have this so-called direct payment requirement. The first definition was that it was sufficient to do it on a kind of digital payment approach. So therefore, we also believe that this is a good, efficient way how to do it, and it's a very secure and reliable way. On the other hand, we don't believe that specific technological solutions should be enforced, because that is, again, limiting the choices again, and just makes things more complex, and also especially more expensive, which in the end needs to be paid by the customer again, because he's getting the bill for higher costs of installation and additional hardware which needs to be installed on the charging station. So therefore, we also believe, yes, let's give the choice to the charging station operators. Let's give the choice to the customers. They will decide anyway. And so far, in most countries where they had the choice between a contract-based approach and a direct payment approach, they have clearly decided for a contract-based approach. We see it in a lot of numbers from more independent sources than ours, that they are clearly stating 90–95% of all charging transactions are done based on contract-based charging, even if they could have the possibility for direct payment, because, as discussed today several times already, it's just much more convenient. On the other hand, there will be definitely some customers who just don't know about a contract-based approach, or don't know about a mobility service provider, and for sure, then it should work. Again, we would prefer a simpler approach than installing a physical hardware device, but that's of course a different discussion, because we also believe that a digital payment process is something we're doing every day in our life already. When we're going online shopping, when we're doing something else, then we're also paying digitally and not with a physical terminal anymore. And that's what we believe should be done. But that is, of course, up to the discussions on the political level.
Yeah, as long as every experience is seamless, then I think people can live with many options. You were talking about analogies, comparison with other fields. It's like, in a warm journey in summer, you need to find some water, you need to drink, but this is not the purpose of the journey. So for charging is the same. You will have you're going somewhere, you will need to charge, but it's not the very purpose of the journey. So that you can go to drive-in and take water from your house and then bring in your car, or you can say, I'm going to buy some water somewhere, and it can be everywhere, in a bookshop, everywhere, and you will pay with a credit card, or you will pay with cash to a guy in the middle of the street. And what is important is that you got many solutions at home. Not at home, in public places, and you get different ways of paying for this. And I think that people can live with several use cases at the same time. And this is reassuring at the end of the day, because you know that you will not find yourself without water or without kilowatts in your car.
Yeah, indeed. Like having more options is always very good, but on the other side, we are now talking as well about the very important piece of legislation which is coming into the force. AFIR is in a discussions, and what we basically see as an industry and definitely as the association is that the focus is maybe very much on one solution and not so much on the solution which is as well in the same way very important. And I will maybe stress here that the things are now changing these days very quickly. And I remember very well that it was only maybe 7 years ago when I used to pay in a taxi only by cash. Then there was a short period where basically I was able to pay by credit card. And then very quickly it jumped to the situation where I'm just not using even the credit card at all. And I don't want to bother with any recipes or something like that. And actually, in our country, this short period with the credit card was not legally binding. So there was no legal obligation for taxi drivers to have these terminals. So in certain sense, we jumped and leapfrog from the cash payment directly to the payment, which is now much more common, and basically use some kind of app, either the global one or even the local one. But so it's very important as well from the position of association that the very important piece of legislation, which is now on the table, as well taking into account such an option, which is the basically reflected in the subscription-based model roaming, which very probable will have a major role in the charging. So do you see here this need as well to put these things in the legislation?
So from my point of view, I don't fully agree on the political perspective that we need to enforce physical payment terminals to ensure better customer journey, because as mentioned, that can be done already by digital payment approaches, which we already have seen in several European countries in place. And as mentioned, yes, of course, in the end, it's good to give customers the choice that they can choose between different solutions. But I think what we are quite often maybe misunderstanding or forgetting in the political discussion is that also the credit card business is not a super streamlined, standardized business, but in fact, it's also a very diverse, very different industry where it really depends on which kind of credit card system are you belonging to. And we know all over Europe, there are even different systems in place, which are sometimes accepted, sometimes not accepted. And we see right now, for a lot of reasons, that these limitations are becoming more and more visible. And also we know that debit systems are very national systems. So Germany, they have their own debit system. Other European countries have their own debit systems again. And it's not that easy to use your debit card issued in Germany and other European countries. Sometimes it's working, sometimes not. It again depends on the agreements between the different banking institutes in the background. And therefore, again, I believe direct payment, yes, for sure, that totally makes sense. And for some cases, it's even important. On the other hand, the way we are discussing it right now on the regulatory level is, from our point of view, a bit short-sighted, because it plans out the challenges of credit card payments and also the additional costs and costs which will only make charging even more expensive for end customers, which we all should try to avoid, that it's becoming more expensive, because we already see, due to the volatility of the energy price, that the costs are unfortunately going up already, and we shouldn't enforce an increase in costs. And please, let's not forget that when we talk about charging and when we talk about customer experience, that of course we all are used to our kind of customers, so that passenger private customers for sure are super important. On the other hand, we also know that a lot of vehicles are being used, even passenger vehicles, in fleets. And when I'm a fleet user, of course, I don't want to get a receipt which I need to hand in then again, which was paid with my personal credit card, to get a reimbursement and things like that. So therefore, we see, of course, that for fleets, for electrified fleets, that this contract-based approach is the much more efficient approach, like fleets are used to in any other kind of mobility industry. When it's about using petrol stations, when it's using toll stations, then they already are used to identify each vehicle as part of a fleet, as part of a contract. And then the invoicing was done to this fleet, but not to the individual driver behind the steering wheel. And we believe that this is exactly the way it should be done, which is not yet really supported fully by the actual draft of the European regulation from our point of view.
Okay.
I'm fully in line with this. I think we need to beware of over-regulation. Sometimes you have to let the market decide. In some cases, it will be a problem if you don't have a terminal. But in other use cases, as Christian say, it's just going to add additional costs and bring more problems than solutions. So if you try to influence the market and to put on some regulations, then there's no reason why you should not demand a roaming connection. I mean, which would be also beneficial to the end user. So I'm quite in line with what has just been said.
Thank you very much, and I can only agree. As we should demand every charger to be intelligent, connected, so we have overview what's happening there. We can provide additional added value services, and we can manage the energy flow, which is, as you said, now more and more important. In the same time, the chargers, in my view, should be open to the ecosystem of other players via some kind of a roaming connection. So therefore, I believe, and we as an association believe, that the mentioning of the roaming and contract-based solutions needs to be firmly in the AFIR.